Hello everybody, welcome back to Stars of the Diamond. My name is Rhett, and I recently got a request to cover a set that I was kind of contemplating featuring anyways, so I went ahead and made a video today covering that particular set. Now it's a pretty confusing set, and there's a lot of misconceptions about this particular set within the hobby. And a lot of that has to do with the dating of the set. And about 10 years ago, I proposed a new date for this particular set, and I still believe that that's the accurate date, and I'll go over that a little bit more in detail. But before I get too into it, the set that we're going to be doing today is the E220 National Caramel Company set. Now, the E220, E just means early candy card, so that's why it's an E card. And the National Caramel Company was a direct competitor to the American Caramel Company. And so we have, the American Caramel Company was from Lancaster and York, Pennsylvania, and the National Caramel Company was also from Lancaster. So same area, two different companies. Obviously, just looking at those two backs, we probably have similar printers. Everything about these is very similar. They were two different companies and direct competitors. And so American Caramel Company had a big hit with their E121 set in 1921, and this company here, National Caramel Company, followed suit. So this set has traditionally been dated, at least in hobby literature. They've claimed that it's a multi-year issue, and I don't think that's accurate. It's always said that it was a 1921 to 1923 issue. There's no indication that this was a multi-year set, mainly because there's no team changes, there's no variations, and there's no corrections, and there were quite a few misspellings of people's names and things like that. So if it had been a multi-year set, they would have corrected things. But let's go over the actual characteristics of a card from this particular set. So here we have a tie cob from the National Caramel Company. I have it within a sleeve here, so we can take that out. So here's our normal back, and similar to the E121 set, the 1922 E121 set, it says this set consists of pictures of 120 of the leading baseball stars. Obviously, the big difference here being the new company on the bottom, but the front of the card features the action photograph along with the name, and the name at the bottom and the team and everything like that almost has a handwritten look and feel to it. And that's how these cards are. They have this little gray box, and it's a thin little gray box at the bottom with the the player name, the position, and the team name. And so that is kind of the overall general idea of that. If we compare that to an E121 card, obviously very, very different. Okay, same information, but done in a completely different style. Now, the National Caramel Company cards are kind of notorious for one reason. The production value of this set was almost zero. And I've collected them, kind of here and there for many, many years. I've never gone after this set in any major way. I had a near set at one point, sold a bunch of them off, and I've kind of accumulated a fair number since then. But, and that's kind of what we have here. So I'm by no means is what I have here anywhere near a complete set. It's probably a third or a fourth of what a complete set would be. And when I say the production value is zero, I mean these cards are almost never found well centered. And the ones that I have here are probably some of the nicer ones that I've ever found. And that's mainly because if I can find them nicely centered, I buy them. And I'm not necessarily a crazy centering person, but a card like this Joe Dugan up here, for this set, that is the exception and not the rule. Most of the time you're going to be finding cards, more like this Sam Harris, which is actually Bucky Harris. His name was not Sam. It was Stanley. And so a lot of the cards in my accumulation here are fairly well centered. You know, for example, that Milton stock up here is probably one of the nicer centered ones I've ever seen. But for the most part, when you find these cards, they will be severely off-cut and off-center, similar to this Lee Meadows. I found some that there's two different cards pictured. Obviously, they're off-kilter. Look at this Jimmy Austin card here. You can see a little bit of the card over here. So whoever the printer was just did not take a lot of pride in what they were doing with this particular set. So it's very, very notorious. So I've never looked at grading population reports or anything like that. But if you are a centering aficionado, this is not the set for you. And so anyways, that's kind of the way that is. Now, there are actually 120 cards in this set. And as we saw on the Ty Cobb here, it specifies that there are 120 cards in the set, and that is 100% accurate. So there are 120 known different cards in the set. No variations, no corrections, anything. Now, of those 120 cards, there are 115 different players. Now, 5 different players, including, I think, Possum Whitehead, Frank Snyder, and I think maybe even Milton Stock, are featured on 2 different pictures or 2 different images of the same player. So there's 120 cards, 115 different players with 5 variations of photos, but no changes to the team name or anything like that, which really leads us to believe that this is a one-time production, one-sheet layout. That being said, there's a little bit of a hiccup in that there are actually 2 separate backs for this set. And they look almost identical, but there's some very, very minor variation. And I'm going to kind of show you those. So here we've got 2 cards, and upon first glance, if you want to pause that for a second, you can kind of take a look at those cards, and you would think, oh no, those are pretty much the same back. They're not. And again, everything, all the information is the same on the 2 cards here, but the spacing size is slightly different. And it becomes more apparent when we look real close. So what we're going to be focusing on is that second line, the baseball stars, and where that line is in relation to the line above it. So for me, how I look at it, when I look at the first B in base in baseball stars, that lines up right underneath that first S in consists. Now if we look down here, that baseball stars lines up with the second S in consists. Sometimes people will prefer the next line, the next word, ball, it's right below the P. In this one, it's slightly off. Okay, whatever helps you to understand the 2 variations on the back, that's what it is. Now, if you also look, the size and height of the line that says American and National Leagues, from this card to that card, we've got a taller American and kind of a shorter, squatter American on that other card. And that's not just from, you know, kind of the distance to the camera. So very, very minor type set differences between the 2 backs. And the other thing that can happen is sometimes these cards can be referred to as reversed back or not. Now, most of the time, as we can kind of see from these cards, all in the same orientation in the pages, most cards are read from sort of the top of the card down to the bottom of the card for the horizontal back. But they can also be found from the bottom of the card to the top. Okay, so, and I believe both types can be found with that. It's not really a variation that I necessarily get too involved in. For me, the main thing is the 2 typeset differences for the back. So that's, you know, kind of our main differences here. Now, again, I kind of want to show these cards really quick. So we're going to go through the players that I have here. And again, this is kind of haphazard. I've just added them to my album as I've picked them up. and so they're not in alphabetical order or anything like that. So there's a couple cool cards in here that of players that aren't featured on a lot of sets. There's a couple guys like Maurice Shannon here, for example, or Scott Perry. You know, some players that had longer careers, but just for whatever reason kind of slipped through those cracks of not necessarily being featured on many other sets. And so there's a few of those guys in this particular set. But so we've got a Bobby Veach here, probably an underrated player, really, really high lifetime batting average. Again, we've got Possum Whited here on a pretty cool horizontal card. Unassisted triple play. And obviously you can see that they misspelled his last name. It's not Wamsgans. And Milton Stock, Urban Shocker, kind of the unfortunate Yankee pitcher who passed away very, very young. We've got Stanley Bucky Harris here, misrepresented as Sam. Pete Kilduff, Cy Perkins, Wilbert Hubble, George Paskert, Claude Hendricks, Walton Cruz, Heaney Grow with the sweet bottle bat there, known for that. Joe Dugan, and I'm going to keep this card off to the side because I want to show that Joe Dugan card again because he's one of the key cards to understanding this set. Steve O'Neill, Goldie Rapp, Robert Neff, that's not his name. His name was Arthur, and so they just completely butchered his first name. And Frankie Frisch, early Frisch card there, again, totally off center. Charlie Deal, George Burns, Bullet Joe Bush, Turner Barber. But look how large and long that Turner Barber card is, how much extra there is on the top of this particular card versus like that Joe Bush. Both of those cards are factory cut. These are not hand cut cards. And so there's just a lot of haphazardness with this particular set. And that's another reason that you have that basically zero production value when it comes to these particular cards. And again, don't let the centering on my examples here fool you. This set is bad when it comes to centering. And so then we've got Lee Meadows, Charlie Hollicher, George Sisler. That's a pretty cool George Sisler card. Kind of fielding sideways there. Jimmy Austin and Ivy Olson. And one thing I do want to point out that the same player, obviously I have two Lee Meadows cards here. The same player can be found with both versions of the back. So again, if we're looking at that first S in consist, this is kind of what I would call for this video type 1, and then we have type 2 right up there. So same player can be found with both backs. Again, exactly 120 cards just as they specified on the back. So the fact that this has always been dated a 1921 to 1923 set has never made much sense to me. Again, when you're dating a set of baseball cards, you go into it assuming a single year issue. Unless you see reasons to think otherwise. If you have corrections, if you have team changes, and we can specify exactly when those team changes, there may be an issue like, say, the old Judge set that was updated periodically, or a set I featured earlier, the Colgan's chip set. We can tell that there were variations and corrections made, so we can pinpoint to exactly what years those cards were made. This set, with everything that we have, indicates a single year of issue. Now, it's not necessarily one of the reasons I think that this set has been dated 1921 to 1923 is simply that's what it was cataloged as in the Sports Collector's Digest, the SCD book, you know, our little SCD book here that we have that, you know, kind of features things. That's how they have, you know, listed this particular set for years. And it really isn't all that important unless you happen to be somebody that collects cards of rookies. Okay, now it's a more modern thing to collect vintage players as rookie cards, but it's had a huge impact on value. So, for example, the 1925 Exhibit Supply Company card of Lou Gehrig used to sell for, you know, $2,000-$3,000 because it was an early Gehrig. But now in the hobby, since that card has been established as Lou Gehrig's rookie card, it routinely sells for $50,000 to $100,000 plus. So it's a trend that's happened in the hobby. That's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with rookies. I collect rookie cards of, you know, Hall of Fame ball players. But there are a few guys who have cards from 1922 and not anything from 1921, such as, for example, Herb Pennock. Herb Pennock has a card in this set, and since it has been listed as a 1921 to 1923 issue, most people are looking for the National Caramel card of Herb Pennock, thinking it's his rookie card because it predates other 1922 issues, like his E121 series of 120. The reality is that's not accurate. It's not accurate, and as painful as that is for someone that's paid a premium for a card to be, thinking it's a year earlier, I feel like the accuracy of the information is more important than somebody's feelings or somebody's wallet book, pocketbook. So we're going to kind of break down why this is a 1922 set. Again, there's no variations, no team changes, no reason to believe that this is a multi-year set. There's the 120 cards indicated on the back. That's exactly what there are. Best way to determine a year for a set is not, and this is important, is not the last year that a player was with a particular team. You always want to date it based on the first year a player was with a particular team. That's the common denominator here. Okay? So if you have a set that has a player that, it hadn't played for Brooklyn for a couple of years, but he's featured with Brooklyn, they may have just been using outdated information or an outdated photo, and that's why he's with that particular team. But if a player is featured with Boston, and in this case, again, I kind of want to go back to this Joe Dugan card. Okay, so this guy is one of the keys to understanding the dating of this card. So Joe Dugan was traded in a three-way trade on January 10th, 1922. Joe Dugan was traded by the Philadelphia A's, who he had been with from 1917 to 1921. He was traded by the Philadelphia A's first to the Senators, and then the Senators traded him to the Red Sox. And the Senators got Roger Peckinpah in that deal, and the A's got Bing Miller. Okay, so it's kind of a good, three really good players being traded amongst three different teams at the same time. But on January 10th, 1922, Joe Dugan was traded from the A's via the Senators to the Red Sox. So there's no way this company would have known that Joe Dugan would be with the Boston Red Sox until January 10th, 1922, which eliminates 1921 as a possibility for this particular set. So again, unfortunate for those that have paid premiums for these cards, thinking they're a 1921 issue, and there's not a lot of players in this particular set that are going to be like that. But these are not 1921 cards, they're 1922. And the other guy is George J. Burns, not Tioga George or George H. Burns, but George J. Burns was with the Giants all the way up to 1921, and then in late December of 1921, he was traded from the Giants to the Reds, and he's featured in this set with the Reds. So it's his first card with the Reds, but those two players are kind of the keys that really point to the 1922 issue. And I eliminate 1923 only because 1922 makes more sense. Could it be 1923? Yeah, but there are some players in this particular set that ended their career in 1921. And that's what a lot of people point to when they're dating this set to 1921, is that, hey, why would they make a George Paskert card when he ended his career in 1920? And it's simply as they just had bad information. Maybe they thought he was going to come back. Maybe they just liked that picture. Maybe they were buddies with George. Who knows? But they just had some inaccurate information. So anyways, that's my theory on, what is going on with the dating of this set is 1922, not 1921, unlikely 1923. But anyways, that's most of what I wanted to kind of cover with this particular set. But this set oftentimes gets confusing, you know, and a lot of the black and white issues from the 1920s do get confused for other issues. And it can be, for a lot of people, it gets a little bit muddy in, you know, the 1920s because they feel like a lot of the cards look very similar to each other, and they don't really care to find out too much information because they're boring to them. I love the black and white cards. I like the real photos versus the cartoony versions of a lot of like T206 cards. The portraits are awesome, but some of those action photos are just a little bit too cartoony for me. So with this particular set, I'm going to kind of feature Ty Cobb because he's Ty Cobb, but I'm going to kind of go over 3 different cards, and just to help those that are trying to identify which card they have. Okay, so we'll feature our E220 card here in the middle. So here is the E220 card of Ty Cobb. Okay, and huge borders on this particular card, but it has its own photo. This photo is not really featured on other cards. The E220 set tends to have some pretty cool cards like that aren't being featured elsewhere, but some of the photos are found in other sets. So very similar to that, this is the E121. So this is the most common set from the early 20s is the American Caramel Company. Now, the American Caramel Company and the National Caramel Company, I believe, were 2 competitors to each other, and so they were directly competing. Now, a lot of times the National Caramel Company, people think of the gray box at the bottom, but it gets a little bit tricky because there's another American Caramel set, and I featured that earlier in a video when speaking of E121, that also features a gray box at the bottom, and that is the E122 set. Now, just to kind of go over, if you haven't watched that video, I'll kind of go over that again. The E121 set is basically just a reproduction. It was being reproduced, and they made a set, and that's the E122 set. Now, it's the same photo. Instead of having this nice clarity, they have sort of a grainy texture to that. Again, a lot of people think these E122 cards, when they see them for the first time, are reprints. They're not. So what they had done is they had actually taken this exact card, put a filter, and cut out a little cutout, put it over the top of this card, and then re-photographed it or reprinted it, and that's why it ends up having this gray box at the base. And so that's E121, E122. But then E122 oftentimes gets mistaken for the E220. And there's actually quite a few graded cards by PSA and I think even SGC where they have these 2 sets mixed up or messed up. And they also will sometimes get the E122 cards mixed up with E121 cards, so it's a big old mess when it comes to grading. So a lot of times if you're looking at population reports, if a card is in one set, not another, and it doesn't make any sense, and I would put not a lot of faith in the numbers that you're looking at on population reports from all 3 sets because they're often confused for each other. But again, these 2 cards both made by the American Caramel Company, whereas this one here is the National Caramel Company. But anyways, that's kind of the ins and outs of that particular set. And if you guys have any information that you would like to share or talk about, or if you'd like to discuss this set, or you just want to talk about cards, hit me up in the comments below. I do read my comments, and I do respond as well. So again, thanks for coming to Stars of the Diamond. And if you'd like to have a particular set featured, let me know. Yeah, this was just a suggestion by Larry, a good friend of mine that had watched some of my other videos and wanted to have this video done. So I was thinking about it anyway. So Larry, this one's for you. And if you like my videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button as well. Also hit that notification bell. If you just subscribe but you don't hit the notification bell, you might not get heads up when I upload new videos. That will hit you a notification that, hey, Stars of the Diamond put up a new video. But again, thanks for coming. And as always, everybody, happy collecting.